Welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha, a podcast shared by David Roylance. This podcast is dedicated to guiding you to completely eliminate the discontent mind and the suffering it causes by attaining enlightenment. Learn and practice the teachings of Gotama Buddha that will guide you to fully attain a peaceful, calm, serene, and content mind with joy. To support this podcast, visit patreon.com/support Buddha or visit buddhadailywisdom.com, where you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online learning resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Now, here's our teacher to share more.
Sawadee Kap. Hello and welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha. Today is our Pali Canon and English study group, and we're studying the words of the Buddha. We're in volume 11, which is titled The Realms of Existence. We're going to be studying chapters 21 through 30 today. And the way that we do this program is I invite students who are in Zoom to volunteer to read one of the chapters. And then after a student reads it, I will share some teachings on that. Then I'm going to open up to any and all questions that you guys have. You can ask questions by putting that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom in the comment section, and I'll be able to see that. Or in Zoom, you can electronically raise your hand and ask any and all questions that you like that way. And same thing, if you'd like to volunteer, you can raise your hand electronically in Zoom, and then you can volunteer to read. So if there's anyone who would like to volunteer to read, just let me know, and then I'll be able to call on you, and we'll progress in the class from there. So welcome to everyone, whether you're joining for the first time or you're joining regularly. Okay, it looks like Vibhav is volunteering to read this first one.
Thank you. Chapter 21, Doomed to Deprivation in Hell for an Eon. Monks, conquered by three forms of false teachings, his mind overwhelmed, Devadatta, cousin brother-in-law to Gotama Buddha, is incurably doomed to deprivation, to hell for an eon. Which three? Conquered by unwholesome desires, his mind overwhelmed, Devadatta is incurably doomed to deprivation, to hell for the duration of an eon. Conquered by friendship with unwholesome people, his mind overwhelmed, Devadatta is incurably doomed to deprivation, to hell for the duration of an eon. And there being something further to be done, he nevertheless stopped halfway with a lower degree of distinctive attainment. Conquered by those three forms of false teachings, his mind overwhelmed, Devadatta is incurably doomed to deprivation, to hell for an eon. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Vibhav. So here we get a chapter where the Buddha is talking about an individual who was actually learning with him, that was his cousin or potentially his brother-in-law, that this individual was actually very jealous of the Buddha. He wanted to be the Buddha in terms of taking on the community. He wanted to get rid of the Buddha so that he could kind of inherit all these students and all the people that the Buddha was teaching. It's reported that he actually tried to kill the Buddha at least once, if not more times, during his lifetime, while the Buddha was actually teaching in different times, during that period of time from the age of 35 to 80, there was some stories that this individual actually tried to kill the Buddha during his lifetime. So this individual had a defiled mind, but he was learning and trying to understand the teachings to a certain degree, but he had a lot of ill will towards the Buddha. And he had a lot of craving as well. And of course, this is all coming from the ignorance. So here the Buddha was talking to one of his students and helping the students understand how an individual ends up going to hell. And you're going to see various things that the Buddha teaches related to that in this particular section of this book. But this is just one aspect of where the Buddha is describing the three things that are leading this particular individual to hell and being reborn in that realm for an eon. Whenever you see the word eon, this is essentially an immeasurable amount of time. That during the lifetime of the Buddha, the highest number that they could count to was 999,999. They couldn't count to 1,000,000 because they didn't have the millionth place during that time frame. So now we have million, billion, trillion, we have all these larger numbers. So since they couldn't count beyond essentially from 1,000,000 and beyond, which we understand today how to do that, they would refer to a very long amount of time as an eon. There's going to be places in this book where you see the Buddha referring to heavenly beings having a very long time frame in their life. He talks about 500 eons. Right here, this is just one eon. So we really actually don't know how long an eon is. It can be anywhere from 1,000,000 or beyond. We know that the Earth has been here for 4.5 billion years. This is our best estimate, with most of scientists agreeing to that particular time frame. So we really don't know how long that is, but it's an immeasurable amount of time, a very long period of time. Whenever you see a teaching like this, the way that you can use it is to see what is leading someone to hell, because obviously that's not something you're interested in. But by shedding those particular qualities, it actually helps you to get closer to enlightenment too. So what I mean by that is, here you see these three things that the Buddha is referring to, which is that this individual has unwholesome desires, that they have friendship with unwholesome people, and that they've essentially become complacent with the growth and development on the path. And because of this, this individual is being reborn into the lower realm of hell. So you can take a teaching like this and understand that, yes, it would be wise to eliminate our central desire, the unwholesomeness of the mind, where the mind is longing, yearning through the sense spaces for permanently agreeable contact. So there are certain unwholesome desires. And one of the unwholesome desires that this individual had is he wanted to kill the Buddha, right? And killing a Buddha or wanting to kill a Buddha would be significant unwholesome karma. So here the Buddha is just essentially saying that this individual has unwholesome desires. And there are essentially multiple of those different unwholesome desires potentially in this person's mind. And then cultivating friendships with unwholesome people. We've talked about this at different times in the foundational programs, where I talk about, say I was a child growing up with a childhood friend that was maybe at 8 or 10 years old, we became friends. And now maybe at the age of 18, maybe they've become a drug dealer, and they never offered the drugs to me, but I've always known that they're a drug dealer. And now 22, 25 years old, we're walking down the street, a rival drug dealer starts shooting at my friend. Now the bullets end up hitting me, right? This is an unwise decision to associate with people who are into unwholesome things. Your reputation is going to be damaged. Your mind can potentially be influenced to do unwholesome things. So the Buddha teaches you to ensure that you're eliminating any relationships with people that are into unwholesome things. And if you're going to do that, you need to do that without judgment, that you're not looking down on these people, but instead you just realize that it's unwise to associate with this type of individual. So if I was truly in that situation where I had a friend from early in life and they started selling drugs later, I would just choose to gradually move away from the relationship and just kind of move on, not looking down on this person, just understanding that's where that person is. And my role in this life, if I was just this person's friend, is to not change this person. That person needs to decide to change for themselves. So by cultivating wholesome relationships, it will help you to be influenced by wholesome things. And one of the ways that you can do this is through the 5 precepts. That if you understand the 5 precepts and how it's important for you to make decisions in line with the 5 precepts, because if you didn't, it would produce unwholesome karma for you. Well, if you choose to be friends with people who aren't practicing the 5 precepts, now you're going to experience the unwholesome results of that based on your decisions to associate with these individuals. So while other people might not know them as the 5 precepts, they tend to be teachings that a lot of people know from various different traditions. And even grandma and grandpa, mom and dad, and aunts and uncles might teach these kinds of things when you're growing up, about killing and stealing and sexual misconduct and lying and taking substances that cause heedlessness. So it would be important for you to cultivate wholesome relationships with the people around you. The Buddha talks about this. Even to get to the first stage of enlightenment, you would need to cultivate wholesome relationships. So that's something to look at as part of your growth and development on the path, is the type of relationships that you choose and who you associate with in your day-to-day life. Then this last one, what the Buddha is talking about here, where he says, and there being something further to be done, meaning there's more training to be done, he nevertheless stopped halfway with a lower degree of distinctive attainment. What he's talking about here is kind of like the jhanas, potentially, that this individual got into the jhanas, but they basically stopped. They became complacent. They didn't continue to train their mind. And this is one of the challenges that one can experience when they're experiencing the jhanas. I talk about this whenever I teach the jhanas, that there's kind of a danger there, that the jhanas are quite significant, that when you're getting into the jhanas, you can really notice it in your own mind, and it can be like night and day from when you are off the path to enlightenment to when you're in the jhanas. And oftentimes people think they're enlightened. If they don't understand what enlightenment is, they can think that they're enlightened when they're in the jhanas. Because in the jhanas, you're still experiencing discontentedness, like anger, sadness, frustration, and other discontent feelings. But the mind has a certain level of concentration and equanimity and clarity that's in the jhanas. An individual can notice that. And if someone doesn't understand what enlightenment is, they could potentially think that they're actually enlightened when their mind really isn't. So if you ever hear somebody describing enlightened beings as still experiencing anger and sadness and frustration and these other discontent feelings, there's a potential that they are in the jhanas experiencing that, thinking that they are enlightened, and then describing what they're experiencing as enlightenment, when in reality it's actually the jhanas. So an individual who's in the jhanas, because you are experiencing a certain degree of attainment, and the mind can oftentimes notice this like night and day, that sometimes the mind can become complacent there because the qualities of the jhanas are so interesting, they're significant, they're impacting the mind. It can be kind of like the wow factor. And not only can the mind become complacent, but conceit can come into the mind too, where the mind becomes arrogant and prideful, looking down on other people. So here it would be helpful for you to just know these things, not because you're scared of going to hell or you're fearful of that or anything like that, because the Buddha doesn't teach that way. He doesn't teach guilt, shame, and fear of hell in order to help you eliminate guilt, shame, and fear, right? He doesn't teach that way. But you can use a discourse like this to help you see the things to focus on for your own practice, to eliminate the central desires, to cultivate wholesome relationships with wholesome people, and not allowing the mind to get bogged down in the jhanas, because that would take you to the point where if you actually become complacent, your mind can actually regress out of the jhanas, and that you wouldn't be interested in something like that. So let me see what questions you guys have. You can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. I think Vibhav has a question, and then maybe Samantha after that.
Yeah, I was just wondering which book is this from? This is ITI.
Oh, I'm not familiar with this abbreviation. I have to look it up, but part of the teachings of the Buddha.
Okay, thank you.
You can look it up. If you look it up, tell you what book it's from.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm. All right, Samantha.
Thank you, Teacher David. I was just looking under the explanation that you put that Devadatta was ordained. So I was wondering if he had been ordained by the Buddha or if it was through some other sort of teachings, and how he was, I don't want to say able to get away with, but how was he ordained and yet so unready for that? And was ordination back in the Buddha's day the same as it is now as far as maybe the requirements or what students should have attained in order to be ordained?
Sure. So I don't know the 100% the history of his ordination. I suspect that the Buddha ordained him because the Buddha would be ordaining, all the people during that time frame. So most likely it was the Buddha who ordained him. And the Buddha didn't necessarily have any requirements of what you needed to do before ordination. He may have had some things that I'm not familiar with, but essentially if you were interested in learning and you were willing to learn, the Buddha would teach you. But then if people wouldn't heed his advice, he would just stop teaching them. He would just ignore them. So if he tried to teach them and he tried to guide them and he tried to help them, and the person just wasn't receptive and wasn't, taking heed to his advice and guidance, he would just stop teaching them and he would just ignore them. And the Buddha referred to this as killing his students. There was an individual who asked him one time, what would you do if a student, didn't, heed your advice? And he said, I killed them. And the individual was like, hold on a second, you can't kill somebody. You teach not to kill. He's like, killing in my teachings is to not talk to them and to not teach them. And if I don't teach them, this is essentially like killing them. Because if you can imagine, like a Buddha, they would have many, many, many people studying with them, and they're going to use their time wisely. And if there's a certain student who just isn't interested in learning, isn't growing, isn't developing, isn't heeding the advice, it's like, why would they continue to try to teach this person? They've got all these other people who are, there bringing the teachings into their life and actively developing the teachings. So the Buddha would just ignore people who weren't really heeding the advice and really doing something with the teachings that he shared.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, let me see if we have any questions on Facebook or YouTube. Okay, I don't see any questions on Facebook or YouTube. So let's go to the next one. For this one, we're only going to read a portion of it. Is there someone who would like to read this? Okay, Samantha, we're probably just going to read like down to this line right here, and then that's it.
Okay, thank you. Simile for the suffering in hell. Monks, there are these three characteristics of an unwise person, signs of an unwise person, attributes of an unwise person. What three? Here, an unwise person is one who thinks unwholesome thoughts, speaks unwholesome words, and does unwholesome actions. If an unwise person were not so, how would the wise know him thus? This person is an unwise person, an untrue man. But because an unwise person is one who thinks unwholesome thoughts, speaks unwholesome words, and does unwholesome actions, the wise know him thus. This person is unwise, an untrue man. An unwise person feels pain and grief here and now in three ways. If an unwise person is seated in an assembly or along a street or in a square, and people there are discussing certain pertinent and relevant matters, then if the unwise person is one who kills living beings, takes what is not given, misconducts himself in sensual pleasures, speaks falsehood, and indulges in liquor, wine, and intoxicants, which are the basis of heedlessness, he thinks. These people are discussing certain pertinent and relevant matters. These things are found in me, and I am seen engaging in those things. This is the first kind of pain and grief that an unwise person feels here and now.
Okay, thank you, Samantha. So this chapter goes on. The Buddha actually goes on to describe the various things that you'll experience in hell. He goes into a lot of detail down here, all the way down here, about each individual thing that you can experience while you're in hell. So if you have an interest in understanding those things, you can read this. It's in volume 11, which are available at no cost, as you guys know, from our website, or you can take it and go print it. You can order it on Amazon, or you can get it at the temple here in Chiang Mai. But we don't have time throughout this group learning program to read every single chapter in their entirety. So what I'm doing is advising you guys to read either before class or after class, and then come to class with questions that you might have. And what I'm doing here is I'm just kind of doing a little bit of an overview with the way that I'm teaching. In the actual books themselves, there's a lot more detail, and I think Samantha reads them pretty thoroughly. She can let you know that there's a lot of detail there that are going to expand upon what it is that you're learning in these classes. If all you can do is come to these classes, that's great. Come to the classes and you'll learn. But if you have time outside of class, or you can make time outside of class to read the words of the Buddha in what I'm sharing, you're going to get much more benefit out of a class like this and a program like this. So here, we're just going to talk about this first part. And then if you guys have questions on anything else, if you have been reading and you have questions on it, just let me know. So here, the Buddha is talking about an unwise person who thinks unwholesome thoughts, speaks unwholesome words, and does unwholesome actions. Unwise, meaning that they don't understand the moral conduct from the Eightfold Path, because wisdom to the Buddha is to understand the natural law of karma, of cause and effect. And if you don't have wisdom of that natural law, then the Buddha is essentially helping you to be able to see that this is unwise to be able to do that, because to walk through life without an understanding of the natural law of karma is like to live in a world that you don't understand, and now you're just going to have difficulty after difficulty after difficulty. So the more you understand these natural laws, the wiser you become, and now you function in the world as a better and better human being, because your mind has awakened to that wisdom of the natural laws. But if you're unwise, you don't have that wisdom. And as part of that, your mind is going to have unwholesome thoughts, you're going to speak unwholesome words, and you're going to do unwholesome bodily actions. So the Buddha is saying that this individual can be seen as unwise by people who are actually wise. If an unwise person were to come in contact with someone who is wise about the teachings, that individual who is wise about the teachings would be able to see that very clearly. They wouldn't do that in a judgmental way. They wouldn't look down on this person, but they would just know that this person is unwise. And what the Buddha is saying is an untrue man here. And this is more as you cultivate wisdom about these natural laws, this is how you'll make decisions about friends to involve in your life, if you are interested in a life partner, if you're a boss hiring employees, if you're an employee choosing to work for a particular manager or boss, you would like to make decisions based on the wisdom of the natural laws, because anybody you choose to associate with, you're going to experience the dhamma based on your choice to be in a relationship with that person. You'll experience the results. So for example, if you chose a boss who was doing corrupt or backhanded things, now as their employee, you're going to be affected by that, right? Or if you're an employer and you're choosing people to work for you that are doing corrupt things, now this is going to cause difficulties for you as a manager or as a business owner or as a boss. So the more that you become wise about these natural laws, not only will you improve your conduct in the way that you interact in the world, but you'll improve the individuals that you tend to associate with. And this is where your life will just become better and better, because you only associate with people who are doing wholesome things. And now you can build up a life together. You know, if it's a life partner or other people involved in your life, you guys can really be doing some wonderful things, even as friends and things like that. So the Buddha then goes into some things that an individual would experience as being unwise, that now when they're hearing other people talk about certain things, that they're like, oh, those things that those people are talking about that are unwholesome, I can see those things in myself. And now this person experiences pain and grief because they're starting to be able to see, like, those people are talking about lying and stealing, and I do those things. Oh, I'm such a bad person. And now the person can feel guilty and feel grief because of that. So that's one of the ways that a person who's doing things that are unwise and unwholesome experiences pain and grief, is that they hear people talking about wholesome things or unwholesome things, and now they realize that they're either not doing those wholesome things, or they realize that they're doing those unwholesome things. And now that causes one's own mind to experience pain and grief. But then the Buddha goes into other things here about hell and things like this. So I'm just going to pause here and see if you guys have any questions on this chapter, rather than go through all of those different things, because they're quite detailed and you can see them for yourself of what the Buddha is describing there. So let me know what questions you guys have by putting those into Facebook, YouTube, or into Zoom. Looks like Samantha's putting something here into Zoom. She says, the hell realm sounds horrific. Worse than any horror movie imaginable. Yeah, I agree. I certainly agree. It's not a place that any of us would be interested in getting to, or going back to, because potentially we've been there in the past. Okay, I don't see any questions anywhere else, so I'm going to move on to the next chapter. Is there someone who would like to read this next chapter? This is chapter 23. Okay, Samantha would like to read that one. Once again, Samantha, I don't think we're going to read all of this one. Let me check. Yeah, this is another really long one. So I'm going to find a good stopping point as you go through here, so that we can just kind of get the heart of the chapter, and then I'll teach from there.
Okay, thank you. Many kinds of tortures inflicted on those who do evil, unwholesome actions. Monks, suppose there were two houses with doors, and a man with good sight standing there between them saw people coming and going and passing to and from. So too with the divine eye, which is purified and surpasses the human, I see beings passing away and reappearing, unwholesome and wholesome, fair and ugly, fortunate and unfortunate. I understand how beings pass on according to their actions thus. Those worthy beings who were well conducted in body, speech, and mind, not abusive of noble ones, right in their views, giving effect to right views in their actions, on the dissolution of the body after death, have reappeared in a happy destination, even in the heavenly world. Or those worthy beings who were well conducted in body, speech, and mind, not abusive of noble ones, right in their views, giving effect to right views in their actions, on the dissolution of body after death, have reappeared among human beings. But those worthy beings who were ill conducted in body, speech, and mind, abusive of noble ones, wrong in their views, giving effect to wrong views in their actions, on the dissolution of the body after death, have reappeared in the realm of afflicted spirits. Or those worthy beings who were ill conducted in body, speech, and mind, abusive of noble ones, wrong in their views, giving effect to wrong views in their actions, on the dissolution of the body after death, have reappeared in the animal world. Or those worthy beings who were ill-conducted in body, speech, and mind, abusive of noble ones, wrong in their views, giving effect to wrong views in their actions, on the dissolution of the body after death, have reappeared in a state without basic necessities, in an unhappy destination, in perdition, even in hell. Now the wardens of hell seize such a being by the arms and present to him Kimyama, saying, Sir, this man has ill-treated his mother, ill-treated his father, ill-treated ascetics, ill-treated Brahmins. He has had no respect for the elders of his clan. Let the king order his punishment. Then King Yama presses and questions and cross-questions him about the first divine messenger. Good man, did you not see the first divine messenger to appear in the world? He says, I did not, venerable sir. Then King Yama says, Good man, have you never seen in the world a young infant lying prone, fouled in his own excrement and urine? He says, I have, venerable sir. Then King Yama says, Good man, did it never occur to you, an intelligent and mature man, I too am subject to birth. I am not exempt from birth. Surely I had better do good by body, speech, and mind. He says, I was unable, venerable sir, I was complacent. Then King Yama says, Good man, through complacency you had failed to do good by body, speech, and mind. Certainly they will deal with you according to your complacency. But this evil action of yours was not done by your mother or your father, or by your brother or your sister, or by your friends and companions, or by your kinsmen and relatives, or by ascetics and Brahmins, or by gods. This evil action was done by you yourself, and you yourself will experience its result. Then, after pressing and questioning and cross-questioning him about the first divine messenger, King Yama presses and questions and cross-questions him about the second divine messenger. Good man, did you not see the second divine messenger to appear in the world? He says, I did not, venerable sir. Then King Yama says, Good man, have you never seen in a world a man or a woman at 80, 90, or 100 years, aged, as crooked as a roof bracelet, doubled up, supported by a walking stick, unsteady, weak, youth gone, teeth broken, gray-haired, scanty-haired, bald, wrinkled, with limbs all blotchy? He says, I have, venerable sir. Then King Yama says, Good man, did it never occur to you, an intelligent and mature man, I too am subject to aging. I am not exempt from aging. Surely I had better do good by body, speech, and mind. He says, I was unable, venerable sir. I was complacent. Then King Yama says, Good man, through complacency you have failed to do good by body, speech, and mind. Certainly they will deal with you according to your complacency. But this evil action of yours was not done by your mother or your father, or by your brother or sister, or by your friends and companions, or your kinsmen and relatives, or by ascetics and Brahmins, or by gods. This evil action was done by you yourself, and you yourself will experience its result.
Okay.
Then after
Okay, I'm going to stop you there, Samantha. This goes on, as Samantha knows, and you guys can see here. It just goes on and on and on with the same kind of thing, where this individual was very complacent, and they weren't cultivating the wisdom that they needed to improve their conduct. So because of that, they're essentially on the way to hell, and they're going to be experiencing the difficulties and struggles as a result of that. So the heart of this whole discourse is essentially helping you to understand, don't be complacent, because you've got this ideal human existence where you can actually cultivate the mind and make your way to enlightenment, and it would be unwise to let it go to waste. As I've shared many times, the Buddha never uses any of the 5 realms as a way to guilt, shame, or fear anybody into doing anything whatsoever. Because remember, his mind's already peaceful. It's already joyful. He's just helping you to understand true reality of what truly does happen. And then you make your choices of whatever you would like to do in the world. So he's helping people to see this natural law of what is it that leads people to these various realms. And one of the things that would do that is complacency. This is why it's one of the 5 hindrances. If you've learned the 5 hindrances challenges with me, the 5 hindrances to your enlightenment. Complacency is one of those, where the mind is complacent. And you can probably understand complacency that, if someone's not meditating or they're not reading books or coming to classes or seeking guidance from a teacher, these kinds of things, these are all complacency. But when you see what the Buddha describes as complacency in other parts of his teachings, he describes complacency all the way to the level that if you have an unwholesome thought that comes into your mind and you do nothing about it, that is complacency. So if you're walking down the street and you start judging other people and looking down on them, if you just let that thought reside in your mind, the mind is complacent. You would actually like to have right mindfulness where you notice the conceit, your own conceit, where you're judging other people, and then you'd like to apply right effort to cut that off and let it go, essentially rewiring the mind to no longer do that. Over time, as you do this more and more, you won't have conceited thoughts. You won't look down on people in judgmental ways, and you won't be arrogant and hostile and bitter when you're around people. But if you just allow that thought to stay and linger and dwell in the mind's staying wired that way. So whether it's conceit or whether it's a central desire, like maybe you're longing, yearning to have sex with lots and lots of people and maybe go outside of a relationship that you currently have or something like this, or maybe you're longing, yearning, just wanting more money, or whatever it might be. There can be any number of unwholesome thoughts that are in the mind. You need to be observant of that through mindfulness and then cut that off and let it go, not allowing the mind to be complacent. So this is the crux of this whole particular discourse, is helping you to understand that it's unwise to be complacent, and he's giving a story to help you illustrate this and be able to understand it, because this is the way that people would remember the Buddhist teachings, that there's essentially 3 ways to help people understand and remember oral teachings. Because remember, the Buddha didn't have the ability to write things down during his life. One way that you help people to remember oral teachings is you give lots of lists. The 5 precepts, the Eightfold Path, the 7 factors of enlightenment, you name it. There's a list, the 10 fetters, there's a list about something. Because if you remember, 8 or 9 of the 10 fetters, it's titled the 10 fetters. You're like, what's that 10th one? I know there's a 10th one in there. What is it? You'll remember, it'll spur your memory, right? So the one way that the Buddha helped people to remember his teachings is to give lists. The other way is that he would repeat himself over and over and over again. You will see if you read the Pali Canon, there's lots of repetition. There's going to be lots of repetition throughout the Pali Canon. That's why it's 45 volumes of books. So like this big book that is the Pali Canon, this is just one of those books. I would say like you could take 100 pages of this, and it might be the exact same paragraph just being repeated, or the exact same page being repeated over and over with like one sentence or one word just changing. So it's a lot of repetition in this book, right? So that's one of the ways that you also get people to remember your oral tradition, is that you repeat yourself over and over and over again. And then the third way is that you tell stories. If you tell stories, if you illustrate the meaning of your teaching with an actual story, then people will tend to remember the story, and they'll remember the point or the moral of the story. So this is what you're getting here, is a story where his students would be able to understand this, remember it, and then it would help them to understand, hey, don't be complacent, right? Because you'll remember this story. So let me know if you guys have questions on this. You can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. Okay, looks like Vibhav has a question. Go ahead, sir.
So in this discourse, there is talking about a divine messenger. What is he referring to here?
It could be referring to a heavenly being as a divine messenger. That's what they would sometimes refer to those beings as.
Okay, thank you.
There's an individual on YouTube. It looks like the gentleman's name is Ram. What is the best possible life that someone could live? The best possible life would be to live in the human realm and actually make your way to enlightenment. That would be the best possible life, because by getting to enlightenment, your mind is now at ease. You're completely peaceful and joyful. There's no discontent feelings whatsoever. And you can navigate the world with peace and joy, and you're living the ideal life. By the time you get to enlightenment, there's nothing about your life that you would change about your life. That whether it's where you live, whether you have a life partner or not, what type of job you have, what you do on a daily basis. You're enjoying every single aspect of your life, moment by moment, day by day. There's nothing in your life as an enlightened being that you don't enjoy. You will enjoy every single aspect of your life. You're just completely satisfied and completely content in the present moment. You're not longing, yearning for the next thing. You're just completely content in the present moment. So the ideal life would be to be in the human realm as an enlightened being. And an individual needs to make their way to that in order to be able to experience it. During the lifetime of the Buddha, people were experiencing enlightenment as early as age 7. And there's no reason why you wouldn't be able to experience enlightenment, early through your life and then live the rest of your life without any anger and hostility. But most of us haven't learned the teachings early in life like that, right? So we might be 20 or 30 or 40 or 60 or 70 or 80 before we come in contact with the teachings. There's never a bad time to actually start learning the teachings. Any time that you encounter the teachings at whatever age that you actually encounter the teachings, that's a wonderful time to start learning. But the sooner you actually start learning, the better, because the pollution in your mind is a lot less. So an individual who's, say, 6 years old starting to learn the teachings, it's actually going to be a lot less challenging for them to get to enlightenment than for someone who's a lot older, right? And then also that individual getting to enlightenment earlier, they actually will enjoy the rest of their life with that peace and joy in the mind. So ideally, people would be learning these teachings very early in life, but if we didn't have that opportunity because we didn't encounter the teachings, then that's no problem. Whatever age we are, we start learning and developing our mind, and you can experience enlightenment at any point during your life. And even if you experienced enlightenment in the last 1 second of your life, you will say it was all worth it, because that last 1 second will be so peaceful and so joyful. And by the time you actually are making your way to enlightenment, it's not like you're completely angry and frustrated and agitated and there's like a light switch and you're only going to get 1 second of peace and joy. But instead, let's just say someone was in the 3rd stage of enlightenment, because that's what they would need to be if they were going to experience the last second of life in the enlightened mental state. They would have experienced 3 months, 6 months, 9 months experiencing the qualities of enlightenment. So it's not like you just go from completely in the darkness to completely in the light in an instant. It's actually gradually, the mind is gradually experiencing the qualities of enlightenment more and more. So someone even in that 3rd stage of enlightenment is experiencing heightened qualities of mind for 3 months, 6 months, 9 months even, where their mind is experiencing very much the qualities of enlightenment. But because their mind still has some residual clinging, they're going to experience a little bit of discontentedness. So being a human being, getting to enlightenment, that would be ideal for everybody and anybody. The world would be like heaven on earth if countless people were actually enlightened. All right, I don't see any other questions anywhere else. So let's move to the next one. You can just see how long this chapter is. You can see how it takes us to actually read it. Think about the Buddha saying this himself and actually teaching it during his lifetime, that he has all this in his mind to be able to say all of this and explain it, right? And then his students were able to remember it and actually then, document it after his death. So here, this next chapter, 24, this is the simile of the lifespan in hell. Is there someone who would like to read this? Okay, Vibhav. Looks like it's the Vibhav and Samantha show today.
Simile of the lifespan in hell. Venerable Sir, Sariputta and Moggallana have evil, unwholesome desires and have come under the control of evil, unwholesome desires. Do not say so, Kokalika. Do not say so, Kokalika. Please place confidence in Sariputta and Moggallana, Kokalika. Sariputta and Moggallana are well behaved. Then for a second time and yet a third time, the monk Kokalika repeated his words, and a second and third time the perfectly enlightened one advised him with the same words. Then the monk Kokalika rose from his seat, paid homage, respect to the perfectly enlightened one, the perfectly enlightened one keeping the right side towards him, and departed. Then when the night had passed, the perfectly enlightened one addressed the monks. Monks, last night, when the night had advanced, Brahma Sahampati approached me and said to me, Venerable Sir, the monk Kokalika has died, and because of his resentment against Sariputta and Moggallana, after death he has been reborn in the red lotus hell. He then paid homage, respect to me, circled me keeping the right side towards me, and disappeared right there. How long, Venerable Sir, is the lifespan of the red lotus hell? The lifespan of the red lotus cell is long, monk. It is not easy to count it and say it is so many years, or so many hundreds of years, or so many thousands of years, or so many hundreds of thousands of years. Then is it possible, Venerable Sir, to give a simile? It is, monk. Suppose there was a Kosalan cartload of 20 measures of sesamum seed. At the end of very 100 years, a man would remove one seed from it. In this manner, the Kosalan cartload of 20 measures of sesame seed might be depleted and eliminated more quickly than a life of single Abuddha hell would go by. One life in the Nirabuddha hell is the equivalent of 20 lives in the Abuddha hell. One life in the Ababa hell is equivalent of 20 lives in the Nirabuddha hell. One life in the Ahaha hell is the equivalent of 20 lives in the Ababa hell. One life in the Atata hell is the equivalent of 20 lives in the Ahaha hell. One life in the water lily hell is the equivalent of 20 lives in the Atata hell. One life in the sweet fragrance hell is the equivalent of 20 lives in the water lily hell. One life in the blue lotus hell is the equivalent of 20 lives in the sweet fragrance hell. One life in the white lotus hell is the equivalent of 20 lives in the blue lotus hell. And one life in the red lotus hell is the equivalent of 20 lives in the white lotus hell. Now, because he harbored resentment against Sariputta and Moggallana, the monk Kokalika has been reborn in the red lotus hell. This is what the perfectly enlightened one said. Having said this, the fortunate one, the teacher, further said this. When a person has taken birth, an axe is born inside his mouth. With this, the unwise person cuts himself by uttering wrongful speech. He who praises one deserving blame or blames one deserving praise casts with his mouth an unlucky throw, by which he finds no peacefulness. Slight is the unlucky throw at dice that results in the loss of one's wealth, the loss of all, oneself included. Much worse is this unlucky throw of harboring hate against the holy ones. For 100,036 Nirabuddhas plus 5 Abuddhas, the slanderer of noble one goes to hell, having defamed them with evil, unwholesome speech and mind. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Vibhav. So here the Buddha is approached by a particular student who was essentially gossiping and slandering about these two individual students who actually were the closest students to the Buddha. Even though we talk about Ananda being very close to the Buddha, because he was with him for 45 years, when the Buddha was asked who were his main two chief students, he referenced Sariputta and Moggallana as being the two top students who were like the ones who had learned the deepest with the Buddha during his lifetime. So here this individual was slandering and gossiping these two top students of the Buddha. And you can see that a Buddha isn't upset, he's not angry, he's not frustrated, right? He's not doing that at all. He's just saying, hey, don't say so. He's essentially trying to help this individual to understand, like, you shouldn't slander, you shouldn't gossip people, especially these people who are like really wholesome people according to the Buddha. And the Buddha would have known who's wholesome and who's unwholesome. And then not long after that conversation, this individual actually ends up dying. And this individual is thought to have been reborn into this red lotus hell. This is one of the subsections of hell, like we were talking about in a previous class, that the Buddha had subcategories for hell and for heaven as well, where we tend to think about these as just kind of one realm. The Buddha had subcategories for each one of these. So this particular rebirth in this red lotus hell is for a very long period of time, and his students are asking him how long, and the Buddha's like, well, it's kind of hard to explain essentially because it's so long, it's an immeasurable amount of time. And he said, well, do you have a way to kind of explain it in like a simile? And the Buddha said, yeah. So he gives this simile about talking about how this individual has a cartload of 20 measures of sesame seed. And sesame seeds are very small, right? And at the end of every 100 years, the man would remove just one seed, right? So there would have just been thousands and thousands and thousands of seeds, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of seeds in this cartload, right? And now just take one seed out once every 100 years, right? And then now going through all these different hells, then eventually we get to the red lotus hell, and this is how long this lifespan is in this red lotus hell. So it's just this immeasurable amount of time, and the Buddha is just kind of giving a simile that kind of helps you to wrap your mind around how really long this is, right? And then the Buddha is just basically essentially getting to the point of it's unwise to gossip and slander, right? And that this is what is going to lead to rebirth in the hell realm, is because an individual who's gossiping and slandering, they have a certain amount of craving, desire, attachment in their mind. They have a certain amount of anger, hatred, and ill will towards this other person. And of course, there's ignorance or unknowing of true reality. And now those three poisons, we can dive deeper into it. What causes an individual to have slander and gossip is that there's, yes, craving, desire, attachment in the mind, because the mind wants to be looking good in front of other people. So it thinks the way to do that is to push other people down and make other people look bad, and then I will look good. So this is not only coming from craving, ill will, and ignorance, right? But it's also coming from the conceit. The mind has conceit, and craving is just another kind of general way to really refer to something like conceit, because in order to have conceit, there needs to be a certain amount of craving. It's a certain type of craving, right, to be able to have conceit. So it's the status of the mind at the time of death that is determining where an individual is reborn. So in order to gossip and slander people who are very wholesome, there needs to be a significant amount of craving, ill will, and ignorance, because this individual doesn't even recognize that these people are wholesome and doing wise things. So here, this is an opportunity for you to just understand this. Again, not being fearful of hell, not feeling shameful or guilty if you have slandered or you do slander people or gossip, but it's kind of just an extra motivation and encouragement to help you understand why it's so important to eliminate gossip and slander. So let me know what questions you guys have here. Looks like Robert and Samantha have a question. Go ahead, sir.
So I'm always confused by the time frames and like how long we've had this human form. I feel like it's hundreds of thousands of years that we've been, evolved to this degree. And I know that's the science perspective, but have we only had this long and to find enlightenment in this form, or were we able to before, or are animals? Because it feels like we haven't had that much time outside the animal realm.
Yeah, so in my opinion, enlightenment wasn't accessible until the lifetime of the Buddha. This is one of the conflicts that you will see in the Pali Canon. You will see places where the Buddha is documented as having said there were Buddhas prior to him, but you'll also see a place where the Buddha says that I am the originator, the discoverer, the declarer of the path to enlightenment, undeclared before me. So that's one of the conflicts. One of the very few conflicts that I've ever found in the Pali Canon is that some people, or some parts of the Pali Canon, say there was Buddhas before him, and there's other place where it says that he's the essentially discoverer and originator of this path. The more you understand about the path to enlightenment, and you understand the intellectual understanding that it takes in order to be able to get to enlightenment, and you look at human history, at least the human history that we're aware of, you can see that human language hadn't really evolved to the point of being able to have that level of intellectual conversation until about the lifetime of the Buddha, 2,500 years ago. Because prior to that, we didn't really have much intellectual conversation. If you go back 50,000 years ago or 100,000 years ago, because humanity is thought to have been around for about 200,000 years. I've seen some people date it back to about 2 million years ago. But nonetheless, we were kind of grunting and moaning to each other. We didn't really have intellectual conversation. So I can't imagine that conversation and ability to communicate what enlightenment is and how to attain it existed prior to the Buddha's lifetime. So in my opinion, the Buddha was the Buddha, and he's the one who discovered and declared the path undeclared before him. So it's only been in the last 2,500 years that this has really been accessible to human beings, in my opinion. But, I wasn't there during that time frame, at least in this human form. So I can't really say with 100% certainty, but that's my perspective on it.
So beings have not had very long, relatively, to even be able to achieve enlightenment. And in relation to the total set of beings, there's still a very small number that are even on the path and able to get there, if I'm understanding correctly.
Yeah, unless there were civilizations before what we know of humanity today, right? Because if the Earth has been here for 4.5 billion years, let's just say, 4 billion years ago, there was a humanity that existed, and that got wiped out, right? And there's no evidence of it anywhere because it was so long ago. And let's just say another 500 million years after that, another humanity, life cycle existed in beings during that time. And let's just say that got wiped out, right? Like, so what we know about science and history is just based on what we know, based on the evidence that we have. But there could have been something that we don't know about, but based on what we know about, it looks like it's a very limited time frame. But during the lifetime of the Buddha, there were countless people who got to enlightenment. And then after his death, too, there were countless people who got to enlightenment. But over the last 2,500 years, that has slowly dwindled because the teachings have essentially been affected by impermanence, and they haven't been shining in the world brightly for people to be able to understand them and actually experience enlightenment. But that's all changing now with what we're doing throughout the world.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right. Samantha, you have a question?
Yes, thank you. In relation to the different, I'll call them subdivisions of the heavenly realm and hell, are those actual divisions, or were they what was believed back during the time of the Buddha, or can we just collectively call it heavenly realm and hell realm? And secondly, if the divisions do actually exist even in this day, are they meant for perhaps what your fetters are that you still have, that you might go to a certain, I don't know, red lotus hell if you have sensual desire versus something else, or was this more just the teachings of the day?
Yeah, the only insight that we have about these is what the Buddha taught. In terms of what you need nowadays to understand about the cycle of rebirth in these 5 realms is just the 5 realms themselves. You don't need to know the individual subcategories. So the Buddha talked about them. He would have independently verified them himself and known about these subcategories. But we don't have to know about these subcategories in order to be able to make our way to enlightenment. This is all interesting. It's like, wow, this individual's mind really understood these realms in a lot of detail. But you don't need to know that same level of detail today in order to be able to experience enlightenment, because as long as you understand that there are 5 realms and what the qualities of those beings are in those 5 realms and how beings move from one realm to the other, this is what you would need to know, because then at that point you understand the cycle of rebirth and you understand the 5 realms and you're awake, or you have wisdom about the world around you. So that now if you start experiencing visually seeing beings from any of these formless realms, or you hear their voices or come in contact with them in any way, you'll know like, oh yeah, this is normal. But whether they're from the red lotus hell or the white lotus hell or anything like this, doesn't really matter. Or whether someone's being reborn in those different hells, it really doesn't matter. But just understanding that these 5 realms exist and how beings move among them and what the qualities of mind are, that's what I focus you guys on, because that's all you really need to know today, even though the Buddha had this deep detail understanding of the realms during his lifetime.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, Vibhav, you have a question?
Yeah, I was just wondering, like the way the total lifespan of humans, not the lifespan of human, but humanity has been described as like humans have kind of existed for, as you say, about 200 to 250,000, somewhere around 300,000 years, maybe 2 million years. And I guess, I think you said at some point that we have another lifespan, the humanity will live around for another 80,000 years. So that the total lifespan of humanity itself is about 300 to 400,000 years, right? But all the descriptions of hell itself is like immeasurable, like over 100,000, hundreds of thousands of years, or maybe even millions of years. So there seems to be some differences in like how long humanity itself is going to be around, and how long even what is this, at least is described here in these discourses, like the lifespan of what people experience in hell or even heaven. So I'm just wondering whether you have any thoughts about that.
Yeah, what I share with people is while these things are very interesting to think about and talk about and conversate about, what it really comes down to is your day to day training of your mind and practicing the Eightfold Path. That's what's going to eliminate your discontentedness. All of these individual details that you're starting to learn about, it's really irrelevant to a certain point because knowing, for example, the red lotus hell or the white lotus hell, that's not going to do anything to eliminate the anger and frustration that you experience when you're interacting with certain people in the world, right? You need to be able to train your mind to eliminate craving, anger, and ignorance. So while these things are all interesting and, we could sit here and try to do the math and figure out if it all works out, I know that these 5 realms exist. I know that it's 100% possible for an individual to get to enlightenment and experience enlightenment. I can explain to you, what enlightenment is and how to get to it, but all this, very much dissecting all these realms and the time frames and all this stuff, these are things that the Buddha talked about during his lifetime. We're looking at a document that's 2,500 years old, so it's been through a certain amount of impermanence. These texts that I share, they contain the information that an individual would need to be able to get to enlightenment. But where there's situations where there's things like this that I can say, you don't really need to know this, I can say that confidently because I know what you need to know in order to get to enlightenment and what you don't need to know in order to get to enlightenment. So, as I started out, when we first started with the very first class of this particular book, I mentioned to you that you're going to hear me say multiple times through this book that I'm going to say, you don't need to know this in order to get to enlightenment. And that's the case here too, is what you're asking is this isn't something that you need to wrap your mind around in order to get to enlightenment.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. You're welcome. Okay, let me see if we have anything anywhere else. All right, I don't see anything. So let's move to the next one. This is chapter 25. This is, again, the Buddha is going to be describing one of the hells. This is a different hell. Would somebody like to read this one? Okay, Keely. Go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you. The hell named the Great Conflagration. Monks, there exists a hell named the Great Conflagration. There, whatever form one sees with the eye is undesirable, never desirable. Unlovely, never lovely, disagreeable, never agreeable. Whatever sound one hears with the ear, whatever odor one smells with the nose, whatever flavor one tastes with the tongue, whatever physical objects one touches with the body, whatever mental objects one recognizes with the mind is undesirable, never desirable, unlovely, never lovely, disagreeable, never agreeable. When this was said, a certain monk said to the perfectly enlightened one, "That conflagration, Venerable Sir, is indeed terrible. That conflagration is indeed very terrible. But is there, Venerable Sir, any other conflagration more terrible and frightful than that one?" "There is, monk. But what, Venerable Sir, is that conflagration more terrible and frightful than that one?" "Those ascetics and Brahmins, monks, who do not understand as it really is. This is discontentedness. This is the cause of the discontentedness. This is the elimination of discontentedness. This is the way leading to the elimination of discontentedness. They excite in volitional formation, choices, decisions that lead to birth, in volitional formations that lead to aging, in volition formation that lead to death, in volitional formation that leads to sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair. Exciting in such volitional formation, they generate volitional formation that lead to birth, generate volitional formation that lead to aging, generate volitional formation that lead to death, generate volitional formations that lead to sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair. Having generated such volition formation choices decisions, they are burned by the conflagration of birth, burnt by the conflagration of aging, burnt by the conflagration of death, burnt by the conflagration of sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair. They are not freed from birth, aging, and death, not freed from sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair, not freed from discontentedness. I say, that's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Keely. So as the Buddha describes these different hells, his students are asking questions, right? Because the students are interested to know about these different hells. So the Buddha is explaining it to them, right? He's not just kind of saying, hey, let me teach you this. He's just kind of helping them to understand based on the questions that they're asking. And he's talking about this undesirable place, this subcategory of hell. And then one of his students say, is there a hell that's worse than that? Right? And then ultimately the Buddha says, yes, there is. It's the hell of not understanding the Four Noble Truths. By not understanding the Four Noble Truths, an individual cannot make an end to their discontentedness. So the Four Noble Truths is where you experience that breakthrough to understanding the problem in the mind, the cause of the problem, the elimination of it, and the path forward. And without understanding that, which is the very first teaching of the path to enlightenment, the Buddha is describing that, hey, this is like a hell, because you're going to be making decisions, that's what volitional formations are, that are going to lead to continuous birth, aging, death, sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair. There's no escape. If you don't understand the Four Noble Truths and you haven't independently verified them, you're not ever going to get free of this continuous cycle of rebirth. So essentially you just stay stuck. So that's like a hell worse than the worst hell, is what the Buddha is saying. So it's important to be able to learn and grow and develop, to be able to learn the path to enlightenment through starting with the Four Noble Truths and making sure that you deeply understand what those are. And I teach those in all the various foundational classes and programs so that you guys can understand that as a very beginning or starting point of the path. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this particular chapter. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. So let's go to the next one. This is chapter 26. And I think this one is somewhat similar. Let me see for a second. I guess we can, well, this one's very similar. Robert, I'll have you read the next one. This one is where the Buddha is talking about this hell named the contact six-fold base, where he's talking about how this particular realm, it's essentially similar to the last one that he was describing. And he says, it is a gain for you, monks. It is well gained by you that you have obtained the opportunity for living the holy life, right? So he's talking about this particular hell and that it's undesirable to be there, that it's disagreeable, never agreeable. But now that you're in this human realm, this is wonderful for you that an individual is not in the hell realm, because being in hell would be undesirable. But now that you're in the human realm, you have this opportunity to live the holy life, purify the mind, and actually get to enlightenment. So this is very similar to the last one. So this chapter, I think, is quite long, or it's at least 2 pages, so we can probably read this one. We'll go ahead with you, Robert, if you'd like to unmute.
The suffering of bondage. So too, monks, when one does not have confidence in cultivating wholesome qualities, when one does not have a sense of moral wrongdoing in cultivating wholesome qualities, when one does not have moral concern in cultivating wholesome qualities, when one does not have energy in cultivating wholesome qualities, when one does not have wisdom in cultivating wholesome qualities. In the noble one's discipline, one is called a poor, impoverished, needy person. Having no confidence, no sense of moral wrongdoing, no moral concern, no energy, no wisdom in cultivating wholesome qualities, that poor, impoverished, needy person engages in misconduct by body, speech, and mind. This, I say, is his getting into debt. To conceal his bodily misconduct, to conceal his verbal misconduct, to conceal his mental misconduct, he nurtures an evil, unwholesome desire. He wishes, let no one know me. He intends with the desire, let no one know me. He speaks with statements with the desire, let no one know me. He makes bodily endeavors with the desire, let no one know me. This, I say, is the interest he must pay. Well-behaved fellow monks speak thus about him. This venerable one acts in such a way, behaves in such a way. This, I say, is his being advised. When he is gone to the forest, to the foot of a tree, or to an empty dwelling, Evil, unwholesome thoughts accompanied by remorse attack him. This, I say, is his prosecution. Then, with the breakup of the body after death, that poor, impoverished, needy person who engaged in misconduct by body, speech, and mind is bound in the prison of hell, or the prison of the animal realm. I do not see, monks, any other prison that is as terrible and harsh, and such an obstacle to attaining the unsurpassed security from bondage, enlightenment, as the prison of hell or the prison of the animal realm. Poverty is called discontentedness in the world. So too is getting into debt. A poor person who becomes indebted is troubled while enjoying himself. Then they prosecute him, and he also incurs imprisonment. This imprisonment is indeed discontentedness, for one yearning for gain and sensual pleasures. Just so in the noble one's discipline, one in whom confidence is lacking, one who does not see danger in wrongdoing and rude heaps of up a mass of evil, unwholesome dhamma. Having engaged in misconduct by body, speech, and mind, he forms the wish, may no one find out about me. He twists around with his body, twists around by speech or mind. He piles up his evil, unwholesome deeds in one way or another, repeatedly. This unwise evildoer, knowing his own misdeeds, is a poor person who falls into debt, troubled while enjoying himself. His thoughts then prosecute him. Painful mental states born of remorse follow him wherever he goes, whether in the village or the forest. This unwise evildoer, knowing his own misdeeds, goes to a certain animal realm or is even bound in hell. This indeed is the discontentedness of bondage from which the wise person is freed.
Okay, thank you, Robert. So here, the Buddha is talking about how, yes, there's this great suffering in the hell realm, but he also kind of mixes in the animal realm occasionally, because the same things that lead to rebirth in hell also lead to rebirth in the animal realm too. And depending on how defiled or polluted the mind is going to determine whether one goes to hell or the animal realm. He describes both of these realms as prisons, as you see here and in other teachings as well. And he's using this kind of getting into debt as talking about the same thing. Is like, if you have all this craving, desire, attachment in your mind, it's like getting into debt because you're making all these unwise choices about your moral conduct. And now when you're making all these unwise choices about your moral conduct, now you're producing more and more unwholesome dhamma that you need to deal with and you have to extinguish, because in order to get to enlightenment, you need to extinguish all your unwholesome dhamma. So the Buddha is talking about this individual who does not have confidence in cultivating wholesome qualities, right? Because they don't have the wisdom to do so, so they don't have confidence of doing that. They don't have a sense of moral wrongdoing. Moral wrongdoing is knowing what's wise or unwise and having understanding of the world around them. Moral concern is that once you understand what's wise and unwise, having the concern to not do unwise things, right? Because someone might know what's wise or unwise, but they could care less and they just do things that are unwise regardless. So by you cultivating moral wrongdoing, you're cultivating the wisdom of what's wise or unwise, and you can cultivate the concern that you're not interested in doing harmful things in the world, because you understand the danger in doing so, that you're going to experience unwholesome karma as a result. And then the Buddha talks about this individual who ultimately ends up in hell or the animal realm as one who doesn't have energy to cultivate wholesome qualities. They don't have ambition or enthusiasm. And ultimately, they don't have the wisdom to do that either. So now this individual, the Buddha is describing as a poor, impoverished, and needy person, that they're going to continue to have this lack of confidence, moral wrongdoing, moral concern, no energy, and a lack of wisdom. So therefore, as they're out there in the world making unwise decisions about their moral conduct, through their body, speech, and mind, they're going into debt because they're producing more and more unwholesome karma that they're going to ultimately need to extinguish at some point, either in this life or some future life, because you can't run and hide from your unwholesome karma. So now this individual conceals their conduct, right? They don't want anybody to know what they're doing. And I'm sure that we've all done that at some point in our life. Maybe when we were kids, when we were around our parents, we were maybe trying to hide certain things from them, or maybe we had a life partner that we were trying to hide certain things from. The Buddha's saying that this is what an individual does who's making unwise choices about their moral conduct. They're going to try to hide certain things, knowing that what they're doing is unwise, so they try to hide it from people. Right? So now the Buddha is saying, okay, this individual who is doing these unwholesome things, they get attacked by their own thoughts, is essentially what he's saying. Is like their thoughts kind of prosecute them, because even when they're alone, their evil, unwholesome thoughts start to invade their mind. If you've ever been laying in bed at night trying to go to sleep, and you're thinking through the things you've done in your day, and you realize that you've done unwise and unwholesome things, this is your thoughts invading you, right? You might even experience that as you're waking up in the morning, or that you're, on a quiet walk somewhere. You might start feeling remorse about the things that you've actually done in your day-to-day life. Well, you can get free of all of that. You can clear the mind and leave all that behind. But if you don't have the wisdom of how to do that, you're just going to be constantly bombarded and invaded by these unwholesome thoughts, because the mind hasn't made any effort towards cultivating the wisdom to be able to eliminate those. So now an individual who doesn't have these wholesome qualities, and who their thoughts are invading them, the Buddha is saying, okay, when you die, this individual is going to be reborn in the prison of hell or the animal realm. And the reason why he calls it a prison is because an individual is reborn in those realms countless times, and the lifespan in the hell realm is quite long, that it's very challenging to get out of those realms. We all did, if we were ever there, we all did. I'm almost certain that all of us have been in the animal realm at some point. Maybe some of us have been in the hell realm at some point. But getting out of those, now in the human realm, this is the opportunity for us to grow and develop. And, before learning the Four Noble Truths, that previous chapter that we were talking about, it's like a real hell to live in life not realizing that it's your own mind that's causing these discontent feelings. Where the Buddha talks about it being a real hell to live a life without knowing the Four Noble Truths, we can also relate to that, and we can independently verify that as well. So the Buddha is saying, okay, now in this poverty and in this debt of producing all this discontentedness in the mind, that an individual is going to experience this massive amount of discontentedness. Essentially, he's going through explaining all of this. So let me know what questions you guys have on this particular chapter. You can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or in Zoom. Okay, looks like Samantha either has a question or would like to read.
I have a question. I'll read also if no one else wants to. This comes up all the time with the breakup of the body. Mm-hmm. So in the human realm, there's a natural end to this being. The heart stops, the body ceases. And so what would be the end point for a being in the heavenly realm, or the afflicted spirits, or in hell? Like, what would you consider an end point there for a rebirth?
Yeah, the lifespan.
I think
go ahead. I'm sorry.
Sorry, it's just it's easy for me to understand what it is in the human realm and the animal realm, mm-hmm. But the formless realms, I'm confused about that.
Yeah, there's just a certain lifespan, and it just gets exhausted. And now because the mind, the consciousness itself is impermanent, and now when it's reached that exhaustion, now the mind being impermanent, and now that life is over. And now there's going to be rebirth in a particular realm. Because if you're in hell or animal realm or afflicted spirits, you're going to be reborn for sure. In the heavenly realm, that being can actually get to enlightenment, and then their life is just exhausted. They can still live in the heavenly realm as an enlightened being, just like you can live in the human realm as an enlightened mm-hmm. being. Where the body gives out in this realm and in the animal realm, and we know the breakup of the body, that's the end of life. In these formless realms, it's just that you've exhausted a certain time frame, and the mind being impermanent, it's just done and it's over.
And the time frame, is that related to your Gama, or is it is there no rhyme or reason to it?
No, it's all related to Gama. Everything that you experience is related to Gama. And it also relates to, like for hell, for example, it depends on which hell you're reborn into. Because mm-hmm. a certain hell is going to have a certain lifespan by being in that particular hell.
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. Okay, it looks like Vibhav has a question.
Yeah, I had a question about, can you go up a little bit, please, where they talk about how, well-behaved monks, and just a little bit down. Says, well-behaved monks speak thus about him, the Venerable Arvan acts in such and such way, behaves in such a way. Would that be slander, or is just like discussing how would you take such a statement like this? Is like, would that not be slander, or?
Yeah, what the Buddha is saying is this individual who is concealing their moral conduct, this individual who has unwholesome moral conduct, they're being advised by well-behaved fellow monks. In other words, they are learning, but they're not choosing to do anything with it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, he's not slandering or gossiping. He's just saying, this individual has gotten the guidance that they needed, but they're choosing not to actually practice it.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's go to the next chapter. Is there someone who would like to read this one? This is chapter 28.
I could read it if nobody else.
Okay, go ahead, Vibhav.
Few in hell to be reborn among human beings or heavenly beings. What do you think, monks? Which is more, the little bit of soil in my fingernail or the great earth? Venerable sir, the great earth is more. The little bit of soil that the perfectly enlightened one has taken up in his fingernail is insignificant. Compared to the great earth, the little bit of soil that the perfectly enlightened one has taken up in his fingernail is not calculable, does not bear comparison, does not amount even to a fraction. So too, monks, those beings are few who, when they pass away from hell, are reborn among human beings. But those beings are more numerous who, when they pass away from hell, are reborn in hell, in the animal realm, in the realm of afflicted spirits. For what reason? Because, monks, they have not seen the Four Noble Truths. What for? The noble truth of discontentedness, the noble truth of the cause of discontentedness, the noble truth of the elimination of discontentedness, the noble truth of the way leading to the elimination of discontentedness. Therefore, monks, an effort should be made to understand this is discontentedness. An effort should be made to understand this is the cause of discontentedness. An effort should be made to understand this is the elimination of discontentedness. An effort should be made to understand this is the way leading to the elimination of discontentedness. What do you think, monks? Which is more, the little bit of soil in my fingernail or the great earth? Venerable sir, the great earth is more. A little bit of soil that perfectly enlightened one has taken up in his fingernail is insignificant. Compared to the great earth, the little bit of soil that the perfectly enlightened one has taken up in his fingernail is not calculable, does not bear comparison, does not even amount even to a fraction. So too, monks, those beings are few, who, when they pass away from hell, are reborn among the heavenly beings. But those beings are more numerous, who, when they pass away from hell, are reborn in hell, in the animal realm, in the realm of afflicted spirits. For what reason? Because, monks, they have not seen the Four Noble Truths. What for? The noble truth of discontentedness, the noble truth of the cause of discontentedness, the noble truth of the elimination of discontentedness, the noble truth of the way leading to the elimination of discontentedness. Therefore, monks, an effort should be made to understand this is discontentedness. An effort should be made to understand this is the cause of discontentedness. An effort should be made to understand this is the elimination of discontentedness. An effort should be made to understand this is the way leading to the elimination of discontentedness. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Vibhav. So a discourse like this can help you to understand that it is possible to go from hell into human form or from hell into the heavenly realm. Oftentimes people are thinking that, somehow you have to go from hell to animal, to afflicted spirits, to human, and then to heavenly realm and these kinds of things. That's not actually true. It is possible to go from hell up to the human realm or up to the heavenly realm. But what the Buddha is saying is it's extremely rare. It's very rare for that to occur, but it is possible. Sometimes people think that there's just one door to kind of get in to any one particular realm, but that's not the case. You can see this here. And you can understand that as beings are born into the human realm, you can see that some beings are potentially coming from the hell realm or the animal realm based on their disposition, based on the way they function. They can oftentimes very early in life be showing signs of somebody who is directly out of the hell realm or the animal realm. You can easily see this in the way people interact in the world. So this helps you to be able to see that that is a possibility. And the Buddha is saying, okay, the reason why this is occurring, that not many beings are being reborn from hell into human beings or the heavenly realm is because they don't understand the Four Noble Truths. There's no ability for them to cultivate wisdom in the hell realm, so they don't know the Four Noble Truths, which hinders them from being able to actually get to the human or heavenly realm. But you can get to the human or heavenly realm without knowing the Four Noble Truths. You're not coming into the human or heavenly realm with knowing the Four Noble Truths. That's something that you learn once you're here. But because they haven't learned the Four Noble Truths, they haven't been able to work on their mind, they haven't cultivated that wisdom, so they have to bounce around in those lower realms quite a bit to get to maybe like a existence as like a rabbit or a turtle or an elephant or something like this that isn't really doing significant harms in the animal realm that allows them to then ultimately make their way into a human existence, for example. So let me know what questions you guys have here. You can put it in the Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or raise your hand in Zoom if you have questions. Okay, I don't see any questions anywhere. So let's move to the next one, which is chapter 29. Was there someone who would like to read this one? Okay, Samantha, go ahead.
Other darkness greater than the blinding darkness in the world of dreadful regions. Monks, there are world interseas, vacant and dreadful regions of blinding darkness and gloom, where the light of the sun and moon, so powerful and mighty, does not reach. That darkness, venerable sir, is indeed great. That darkness is indeed very great. But is there, venerable sir, any other darkness greater and more frightful than that one? There is, monk. But what, venerable sir, is that darkness greater and more frightful than that one? Those ascetics and Brahmins, monk, who did not understand as it really is. This is discontentedness. Who did not understand as it really is. This is the cause of discontentedness. Who did not understand as it really is. This is the elimination of discontentedness. Who do not understand as it really is. This is the way of leading to the elimination of discontentedness. They excite in volitional formations that lead to birth, and volitional formations that lead to aging, and volitional formations that lead to death, and volitional formations that lead to sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair. Exciting in such volitional formations, they generate volitional formations that lead to birth, generate volitional formations that lead to aging, generate volitional formations that lead to death, generate volitional formations that lead to sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair. Having generated such volitional formations, they tumble into the darkness of birth, tumble into the darkness of aging, tumble into the darkness of death, tumble into the darkness of sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair. They are not freed from birth, aging, and death, not freed from sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair, not freed from discontentedness, I say. But monk, those ascetics and Brahmins who understand as it really is, this is discontentedness, who understand as it really is, this is the cause of discontentedness, who understand as it really is, this is the elimination of discontentedness, who understand as it really is, this is the way leading to the elimination of discontentedness. They do not excite in volitional formations that lead to birth, and volitional formations that lead to aging, and volitional formations that lead to death, and volitional formations that lead to sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair, freed from discontentedness, I say. Therefore, monks, an effort should be made to understand this is discontentedness. An effort should be made to understand this is the cause of discontentedness. An effort should be made to understand this is the elimination of discontentedness. An effort should be made to understand this is the way leading to the elimination of discontentedness.
All right, thank you, Samantha. So this is very similar to one of the previous chapters where the Buddha is talking now about not knowing the Four Noble Truths is living in the darkness, right? We might have looked back at our life and been able to see that man, we were so much in the dark, arguing and festering and having so many conflicts, blaming other people for the things that we experience, blaming other people for our anger and frustration. That's what you'll do when you don't understand the Four Noble Truths. And that's living in the darkness, because it's like chasing your tail around in a circle. Because why we're constantly blaming other people, constantly arguing with other people, constantly trying to get other people to do things our way, we never experience real progress and real growth in our day-to-day life, because we're looking at the wrong source of the actual problem. The actual source of the problem is within one's own mind. That's why not knowing the Four Noble Truths is living in the darkness, or like the Buddha said previously, like living in hell. So it would be wise for an individual to learn and grow and develop, starting with the Four Noble Truths. You're going to see this, and if you've been studying these books, you've seen this many, many times, where the Buddha is constantly pointing to the Four Noble Truths as the very beginning of the path to enlightenment. So let me know what questions you guys have here. Remember, you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or in Zoom. Okay, I don't see any questions. So let's move to the last chapter for today. We're going to be entering now into the section of the animal realm. We're going to start studying that now that we've done a class or two with the hell realm. This is the first chapter in the section of the animal realm. Is there someone who would like to read this one? Okay, looks like Robert. Go ahead, sir.
To reappear in the company of animals. Monks, there are animals that feed on grass. They eat by cropping fresh or dried grass with their teeth. And what animals feed on grass? Horses, cattle, donkeys, goats, deer, and any other such animals. An unwise person who formerly excited in flavors here and did evil, unwholesome actions here, on the dissolution of the body after death, reappears in the company of animals that feed on grass. There are animals that feed on dung. They smell dung from a distance and run to it, thinking, we can eat, we can eat. Just as Brahmins run to the smell of the sacrifice, thinking, we can eat here, we can eat here. So too these animals that feed on dung smell dung from a distance and run to it, thinking, we can eat here, we can eat here. And what animals feed on dung? Fowls, pigs, dogs, jackals, and any other such animals. An unwise person who formerly excited in flavors here and did evil, unwholesome actions here, on the dissolution of the body after death, reappears in the company of animals that feed on dung. There are animals that are born, age, and die in darkness. And what animals are born, age, and die in darkness? Moths, maggots, earthworms, and any other such animals. An unwise person who formerly excited in flavors here and did evil, unwholesome actions here, on the dissolution of the body after death, reappears in the company of animals that are born, age, and die in darkness. There are animals that are born, age, and die in water. And what animals are born, age, and die in water? Fish, turtles, crocodiles, and any other such animals. An unwise person who formerly excited in flavors here and did evil, unwholesome actions here, on the dissolution of the body after death, reappears in the company of animals that are born, age, and die in water. There are animals that born, age, and die in filth. And what animals are born, age, and die in filth? Those animals are born, age, and die in a rotten fish, or in a rotten corpse, or in a rotten porridge, or in a cesspit, or in a sewer. An unwise person who formerly excited in flavors here and did evil, unwholesome actions here, on the dissolution of the body after death, reappears in the company of animals that are born, age, and die in filth. Monks, I could tell you in many ways about the animal realm, so much so that it is hard to finish describing the discontentedness in the animal realm.
Okay, thank you, Robert. So here the Buddha is helping you to be able to see things that happen here in the human realm that are going to lead to rebirth into the animal realm. And here he's talking about exciting in flavors, right? So that's anything that you're tasting through the tongue. This isn't the only way that you can be reborn into the animal realm. That's why it's important to look at the teachings of the Buddha in totality. He's just talking about one aspect of rebirth into the animal realm here, that you shouldn't take a discourse like this and be like, oh, this is the only way that you would be reborn into the animal realm, and this isn't actually true. So here he's just helping you to be able to see one aspect of that. And this is why it's so important to eliminate sensual desires. By the time you get to enlightenment, you will enjoy the food that you're eating. You will know, like, wow, this is really good food. It tastes really wonderful. You'll know that about the food, but you won't cling to it and long and yearn for it and get all excited just because of this particular flavor. You'll enjoy it for the moment, and then you'll move on to the next thing. Since Robert read, I can recall when I was in San Francisco a few months ago, we had some ice cream at this one particular place, and it was like, wow, that is really good ice cream. It was pretty amazing. And the three of us were sharing this one little thing of ice cream, and it was like, wow, this is super delicious. But when it's done and it's over with, it's over with. You move on to the next thing, right? But if somebody's mind was clinging to that and longing, yearning, and now the mind isn't being trained to eliminate the central desire because the mind's going to long and yearn through all these sense bases, now an individual can be reborn into the animal realm. So the Buddha is helping you to be able to see that connection between the elimination of your own central desire and potential rebirth, right? Again, not to guilt, shame, or fear anybody, but just to share the truth about what is really occurring. Because by eliminating the central desire, you're eliminating your discontentedness. And here you can see the Buddha saying that he has these many different ways that he could tell you about so much discontentedness in the animal realm, right? And he's just describing it to a certain degree here to help people understand. So let me know if you have any questions here on this particular chapter, or if you'd like to know where Robert and I got ice cream in San Francisco. Maybe that's what Vibhav would like to know.
No, I'm okay. I just had a question about the way this is described is saying basically like if you animals who like eating fresh and dried grass with their teeth, and then this is basically saying that if you like have sensual desire for such flavors, then you will be kind of born as that. So it's basically they kind of describing the karma here, saying that whatever desires that you have in the next realm, you'll be born to kind of fulfill the same desires. Or try to fulfill the same desires.
Yeah, it's a little bit deeper than that. It's that because the mind has central desire in this life for certain flavors, now when you're reborn into a realm where the flavors that you're tasting are things like grass and poop and all these other things that the Buddha is talking about here that an individual would then experience, because now you can extinguish a certain degree of that central desire. This is a question that you guys have asked in a previous class, like how do you extinguish your unwholesome karma by just being in the animal realm? Well, if you're in the human realm and you have all this excitement and flavors and central desires through the tongue, well, if you're reborn into the animal realm, you're not getting very many flavors that are appealing to you. So now your mind, that consciousness in that animal existence, is degrading and diminishing and eliminating, reducing some of its central desire just by being in the animal realm. And then, of course, when one comes into the human realm, that central desire can increase again, right? But nonetheless, there's some of it that is being eliminated just through that existence of living in that existence.
So just to kind of repeat what you said, you're saying that like if in a human realm, and like when you're talking about ice cream in San Francisco or going to a nice restaurant and having good food, and if you're clinging to it, there are all these complex flavors. And you're keeping that with you, all the taste that you have. But then you're born into the animal realm because you have all these essential desires. And in that animal realm, because there's not that many flavors, you end up eating grass or poop or whatever, right? And so that kind of eliminates that desire for those complex flavors because you don't really get those, right? But there's also, we also talked about that there's one way to fulfill them. So there's maybe some flavor that you had that you desire for, and you're born in like company of as a horse or cattle or donkey, and then maybe the grass flavor that you get was something that you were desiring in your previous life as well. And that would also get eliminated just by extinguishing or like by fulfilling that essential desire of that similar flavor.
Yes, the only thing I'll add to that though, Vibhav, is it's not that you're eliminating it in the animal realm, you're reducing it to a certain degree.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, because you can't actually eliminate it 100% until you're in the human realm or the heavenly realm.
Oh, okay, so the only way to eliminate a sensual desire is to be in the, like, by following the noble eightfold path and Four Noble Truths. Exactly. That's the only way to eliminate it, because in the animal realm there's no way to do it.
Exactly.
Okay, Thank you. It
Yep.
makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, you're welcome. This is why it's helpful to study these teachings, even though they're sometimes challenging for the mind to grasp, but it's helpful to have a dedicated practitioner and teacher to kind of guide you through it so you can process your thoughts when you're learning this. And that's why it's also important for you guys, if you don't already, is read these things that I'm writing down here, because this is going to help you as well. Okay, so let me see if we have any questions anywhere else. And I don't see any questions anywhere else. So I'm just going to end class here by just thanking all of you guys for joining. Thank you for your interest to learn and practice the teachings of the Buddha. Thank you for your reading. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for your participation in the class. It's wonderful to have individuals who are dedicated to learning and growing and developing on the path. So thank you for that dedication and that ambition that you have. Next week, we're going to be in the next 10 chapters. We're going to be in chapters 31 through 40. So if you'd like to read those ahead of time, you surely can. And then you'll just have that much more insight coming into the class. Tomorrow in the group learning program, I'm going to be teaching the 4 stages of enlightenment and the 10 fetters. So if you would like to learn that, you can attend the group learning program. And that's 9 a.m. on Sunday and 9 p.m. Sunday. So depending on where you're at in the world, it could be Saturday evening or Sunday morning. You need to look at your time zone. But I'm going to be teaching the 4 stages of enlightenment and the 10 fetters as part of the restart of the group learning program. And then the following week, I'm going to be starting on chapter 1 of our book, Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Enlightenment. So thank you all for joining, and perhaps we'll see you guys in a future class. Have a very wonderful and lovely rest of your day. Take care. Sawadee Krap.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. To provide support for this podcast, visit patreon.com/support Buddha. To access more teachings, visit buddhadailywisdom.com. There, you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Remember to establish a daily, consistent meditation practice, along with learning and practicing these teachings. A well-developed meditation practice is the foundation in which to train the mind to attain enlightenment.